North Korea is hacking into our electricity grid as we speak. Let me explain. See, Kim Jong-un knows it's hard for him to compete on the physical battlefield with boots on the ground against countries like America. So he decided to get creative and take his military into the cyber battlefield. Think about it. Imagine what would happen if America lost power for a day. Banks and businesses would shut down, hospitals wouldn't be able to access medical records, factories would be at a standstill, billions of dollars would be lost after just one day. But what if the blackout lasted for 7 days? What if it was even longer? Now imagine how hard it would be to take down America's power grid through traditional military means, bombers, missiles, rockets. It would be a logistical nightmare that would cost a fortune, both things North Korea does not have. But how hard would it be to achieve the same effect through hackers? Realistically, if the hackers are good enough, you would only need a handful of them, all crammed into an affordable small building in North Korea. That is why in a surprisingly short amount of time, this special division of North Korea's military went from practically nothing to one of the most dangerous cyber warfare groups on the planet. They're basically on the same level as the hacker armies of global superpowers like China and the US. And after years of terrorizing businesses, hospitals, stealing billions in crypto, they've earned a nickname, the Lazarus Group. They even have their own cute logo. And their most recent mission was launching a ton of attacks against major American energy companies between February and July of this year. And the public is only just finding out about this now. How did they pull it off? With something called the Log4j exploit. This exploit caused major panic right before Christmas last year. It gave attackers access to hundreds of millions if not billions of devices worldwide. Cloud storage servers, hospital equipment, kids' video games, anything that connected to a network was fair game. And this wasn't just a bad piece of code you could just slap a patch on and call it a day. No. This was so widespread that it could be coming back to haunt us for years.
We're going to be dealing with this vulnerability, Eamon, for a very long time. This is not something that is going to be patched and finished. This is something that we're going to be working on likely for months, if not years, just given the ubiquity of the software and the ease of exploitation.
See, in the world of cyber warfare, there are no rules, there are no Geneva Conventions, and no target is off limits. North Korea's hackers have proven time and time again that they mean business. And now North Korea is aiming to bring our infrastructure to its knees. And the US energy grid is way more vulnerable than we realized. Stay dangerous, and this is the Lazarus Group. And really fast, if you want to earn some free cash, then you gotta check out freecash.com. Freecash.com lets you earn free cash by completing simple tasks like downloading apps, playing games, taking surveys, watching videos, and more. Like this task where you literally just have to download TikTok and you'll earn 88 cents. Or this one where you just download and start a free trial of ExpressVPN and you'll earn $1.45. There are even offers where you can earn up to $10 to $50. Once you complete the offer, you'll get the reward credited to your account, and then you can withdraw your money using 20 different cash out options like PayPal. After completing a few offers, I was able to withdraw $5 to my PayPal, minus a 5% PayPal fee. FreeCash has over 20,000 positive reviews on Trustpilot, and on average, FreeCash users cash out $50,000 every single day from completing tasks. And if you want to be earning some of that money, pause the video and sign up for free by clicking my referral link below. Pause the video and click the link below now. Thanks to FreeCash for sponsoring this video.
What you have to understand is that the people you see around you in your day-to-day life right now may look civilized and peaceful, but remember, we are only one meal away from a revolution. That is the power of attacking a country's electricity grid. And while the US may very well be one of the most developed nations on Earth, America's electricity grid is very fragile. There are 55,000 key places in America's power grid called substations, links in the chain that bring electricity from power plants to homes and businesses. If just 9 of these substations in the right places were taken out all at once, the entire United States would lose power coast to coast. And the first 24 hours of an attack like this would be miserable. People trapped in elevators would have to be rescued if they can be reached at all. Air traffic control centers wouldn't function, so any flights in the air at the time would have to fend for themselves. ATMs and bank cards would be worthless, so purchasing anything without paper money would be impossible. Backup generators at hospitals, supermarkets, and water treatment plants would run out after a day or two, and without electricity, it would be impossible to refill at gas station pumps. So cars and generators would quickly become useless too. All refrigerated food would eventually spoil. Cities would eventually run out of drinking water, and with no pumps running in sewage systems, all indoor plumbing would fail. Cell phone towers would lose backup power, cutting off all chances to make phone calls. It would get real bad fast, okay? Not only that, but after the supply chain shortages and the housing market boom we've seen over the last couple years, important parts like transformers are in such severe shortage that experts are already calling it a national security risk. If an attack like this were to happen now, we'd be looking at 18 months before anyone could turn the lights back on. How likely is this kind of doomsday situation? It's hard to say exactly, but the thing is, cyber attacks like this have been attempted before. In December of 2016, Russia hacked into Ukraine's power grid and used a virus to flip every single circuit breaker at a power station just north of Kyiv. Almost the entire city went dark for hours. But what made this attack truly frightening was that the virus was programmed to also turn off the station's protective relays. The plan was to catch Ukrainian engineers in a trap. Workers would have been in such a hurry to turn those circuit breakers back on that when they did, it would trigger a current overload, destroying key parts of the station. With the station ruined, Kyiv would have been without power for weeks, even months, until all the repairs could be made. The only reason it didn't work was that for some reason, part of the code was accidentally sent to the wrong IP address. A tiny little mistake prevented Kyiv from descending into darkness. But is North Korea even capable of such an attack? Unfortunately, they've spent the last several years proving that the answer is yes. It seems weird to think that a country as tiny as North Korea could be a threat to the United States. They love to scare people by showing off their nuclear weapons all the time, sure, but how many nukes do they actually have compared to the US? Not that many, it turns out. They could also try to brag that they have the 4th largest army in the world. See that, US? We have almost as many troops and tanks as you. Still think we're tiny? Except these are ex-Soviet tanks that are so old and run down they should probably be in a museum. And their soldiers are literally starving to death. Their own families have had to step in to bring them food, and troops are even violently robbing their own citizens because their malnutrition is so bad. Ouch. The fact is, North Korea just doesn't have the funding for an elite military, and international sanctions aren't changing anytime soon. But the Kim dynasty knows the importance of an idea called asymmetric warfare. If you have an enemy more powerful than you, taking them head-on is a bad idea, unless you can find a way to do it where it makes all their advantages meaningless. And Kim Jong-il knew that the internet would give them just that advantage. As Kim Jong-il wisely said, quote, "Modern war is decided by one's conduct of electronic warfare," end quote. And that, quote, "if the internet is like a gun, cyber attacks are like atomic bombs," end quote. So when Kim Jong-un took over in 2012, he carried on that same legacy in a way that no one saw coming. Less than 1% of North Koreans are allowed access to the internet, and there are only 1,000 IP addresses in the whole country. So to train this new army, they recruit students with promising math skills and send them to countries like China to train in computer science. Then they assign them to work in hidden locations in China to have full access to the internet and go completely undetected. They're extremely skilled at avoiding detection in other ways too, using dozens of names in order to confuse law enforcement. But we would come to know them as Lazarus. What's more is that even if they do get caught, North Korea is completely cut off from the rest of the world. What are you gonna do? Extradite them? Send in CIA agents to catch these hackers? Anyone who does get linked to Lazarus is completely untouchable. All of this means that this hacker army has flown under the radar for years, and it wasn't until 2014 that an attack happened big enough to catch America's attention. In 2014, Sony Pictures was making the masterpiece of a comedy that is The Interview. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you definitely should. But as you can imagine, the real Kim Jong-un was not a big fan of this movie. North Korea even went on to call this masterpiece an act of war. But the way North Korea retaliated caught everyone by surprise. Just before Thanksgiving that year, everyone at Sony came to work one morning and discovered their security badges weren't working. When they tried to log into their computers, they were greeted with a message warning them that if they didn't comply with shutting down that movie, they would release Sony's top secrets for the world to see. And when the company didn't comply, the Lazarus Group released the data, even emailing it directly to news stations across the country. Now this data held some juicy details that Sony did not want the public to know. Secrets like executive salaries, confidential internal emails, insider gossip, emails where producers and executives called Angelina Jolie a spoiled brat or Kevin Hart a whore. There were even racist comments made about Barack Obama. Unfinished films and scripts were leaked, and thousands of people had their identities and social security numbers stolen. But even after that leak, Sony went forward with production of the film, so the Lazarus Group just doubled down. When The Interview went to premiere that December, the hackers threatened physical violence, comparing what would happen to September 11th. Cast members and their friends were too scared to even go to the premiere. And even though no attacks happened, the damage was done. No movie theater was willing to show the film, and its debut was cancelled. And when it was over, the attackers fried all of Sony's hard drives and servers. It cost Sony over $15 million to clean up that mess, with untold millions more in lost film sales afterwards. Investigators said that, quote, "The folks who did this didn't just steal everything from the house, they burned the house down," end quote. But as flashy as this retaliation hack was, it wasn't really a moneymaker for the Lazarus Group. Unlike their other hacks, they didn't benefit much from it other than upping their notoriety. And since North Korea is pretty poor and the supreme leader has some expensive bills to pay, they had to come up with a money-making hack fast. And so their next mission became a $100 million heist. In February 2016, the Lazarus Group attacked the SWIFT system in the Central Bank of Bangladesh. SWIFT is the system used to make international money transfers. It's pretty much one of the only legal ways to send money from one country to another. And once they got into Bangladesh Bank's network, they made fake transactions to the Federal Reserve in New York City. $20 million was sent to Sri Lanka and another $80 million to the Philippines. The money was hidden in multiple unsuspecting accounts converted to Philippine pesos, and when they finally got their hands on the money, they laundered it through casinos and fake charities. They even timed it just right so that Bangladesh had no chance to warn anyone when they saw what was going on. The attack was made just at the start of the Chinese New Year, a non-working holiday for all the countries involved. So by the time the Philippines bank got the message, it was already way too late. This attack made North Korea the first and only country to commit bank robbery over the internet. And while a $100 million bank robbery is already a big deal, that is chump change compared to the $1 billion this heist was supposed to steal. They still got away with a fortune and crippled the world's confidence in the international banking system. And after this, the Lazarus Group was feeling more powerful than ever, so they decided to launch another attack that would let them just watch the world burn. It was a Friday morning, and NHS healthcare workers across the UK were going about their regular work shift. Suddenly, Their computer screens started going blank, then displaying this message. It was a ransomware attack, codenamed WannaCry. The Lazarus Group used encryption software to scramble victims' files, and the only way to unscramble them would be for the hospital to pay up. But what freaked everyone out is that unlike most attacks before, which used infected emails and spear phishing, this malware was spreading rapidly across the internet all by itself. Nobody had to click on anything to get infected. It happened all on its own. It paralyzed over a third of the UK's hospitals and more than 600 private practices across the country. CT scans and MRIs were down. Nobody could see lab results or access patient records. Doctors and hospitals were forced to turn away all but the most critical patients. People would come in with bone fractures, be put in a splint, and be sent home while being told to come back in a few days. The situation quickly became a national emergency. But as more reports kept flooding in, people realized that this attack wasn't just targeting the NHS, it was infecting computers across the planet. It destroyed nearly 250,000 computers in over 150 countries, doing between $4 billion to $8 billion in damage in just one afternoon. Companies around the world were paralyzed in a matter of hours. It seemed completely unstoppable. Cybersecurity firms around the world watched in horror as nothing they tried seemed to work. It was the apocalyptic nightmare everyone had been afraid of. But that same day, a 22-year-old cybersecurity researcher named Marcus Hutchins was helping to investigate the attack when he noticed the malware kept pinging an unregistered web domain. He paid the $10 to register it himself just to get a closer look, and then suddenly the attacks stopped. He'd found the malware's hidden kill switch and turned it on just by luck. But the sheer destruction and fear spread by the attack wasn't even the best part. Turns out WannaCry's new ability to hack computers remotely and spread an infection all on its own was thanks to a couple of leaked NSA secrets. One was a weakness in just about any computer that used Microsoft Windows, and the other was a special hacking tool that the NSA had designed themselves. They had known about these weaknesses for 5 years, but kept them to themselves. And eventually, these secrets were sold on the black market and fell into North Korea's hands. Unlike the Bangladesh bank heist, the Lazarus Group wasn't doing it for the money this time, since they only charged $300 in Bitcoin per user and only made about $160,000 in total. They just wanted to see how much destruction they could pull off in one shot. But it wouldn't be too much longer before they turned back to stealing money. And this time, they weren't going after regular banks. As carefully planned as the Bangladesh bank robbery was, North Korea has found a much easier way to steal money and get past those pesky international sanctions: cryptocurrency. All crypto values are given in USD value at the time of the theft. On June 23rd of this year, over $100 million in crypto was stolen from Horizon Bridge. Once the money was stolen, the Lazarus Group laundered it through crypto laundering software called Mixers. But you know what the craziest part is? This is one of the smaller heists they've gotten away with. Before hacking Horizon Bridge, they attacked the NFT minting game Axie Infinity, and the Lazarus Group made off with over $620 million. More than $600 million from a single gaming company. And that's still not all. Back in 2019, the UN reported that North Korea had already stolen more than $2 billion in crypto over the last decade. And just what are they doing with all that money? With the extreme poverty of the country, international sanctions, and the excess lifestyle of the elite, the country is bankrupt. and they have literally no way to make money other than to steal it. Kim Jong-un is using these stolen funds to keep the country running on the bare minimum, to keep the ordinary people subdued and isolated, and, of course, to build warheads capable of reaching New York City. But as dramatic as he can be, if Kim Jong-un's army can find a way to attack his enemies without starting nuclear Armageddon, they're going to find it. And one of America's biggest weaknesses lies in how easy it could be to just turn out the lights for good. With North Korea's reputation as poor and isolated, it's an easy mistake to not take threats from them very seriously. But what people don't realize is just how dangerous North Korea has made themselves while the rest of the world was asleep. And now they can topple entire industries from half a world away without ever shooting a single bullet. But it's like one escaped member of North Korea's army says so well, quote, "It is easy to wake up a person who is sleeping, but it's very hard to wake up the man who is pretending to sleep," end quote. It's easy to ignore a problem by pretending it doesn't exist, until the day comes when the lights go. North Korea's hacker army may be dangerous, but it's nothing compared to China's forced organ harvesting, where the Chinese military and hospitals harvest the organs of prisoners while they're still alive to sell to wealthy Westerners in dire need of an organ. They do this because it makes them a lot of money. We're talking $62,000 for a kidney, $30,000 for an eye, $120,000 for a liver, $300,000 for a pair of lungs. However, we have to stop going over this right now before we get demonetized and age restricted. But if you want to watch our full private documentary on forced organ harvesting and many other topics too controversial for YouTube, scroll down and click that join button below. This YouTube membership came out of this need to cover important topics that wouldn't fly on YouTube. It's where we post a new private documentary every month, never to be released publicly, and members love them. Many say that this channel is the only channel they've ever clicked join on because it's just that worth it. And there's a 30-day refund policy too, unlike most YouTube memberships, meaning if you join for the first time and you don't think it's worth it, email us and we'll refund you your money. So hit that join button below to watch now.
Have you guys seen that Interview movie yet? I personally really liked it, even though it was like fairly cheesy. But yeah, if you're new here, this is one of the biggest channels on YouTube for documentaries on money, power, war, and crime. So if you enjoyed this video, click that subscribe button below. You can follow me on Instagram at JakeTran, but that is gonna wrap it up. Stay dangerous out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.